We were looking for you. We thought you were not going to be with us today.
Oh, no, I was sitting right here trying to get into the Zoom.
And it wouldn't let you go in today?
It seemed not to let me go in. And so I went around back and found it and got myself in.
Excellent. I was just going to pick up the phone and call you, make sure that everything was okay on your end. So I'm glad that that we're up and running.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I was very curious about the fact that over the Sunday Globe, there was an interesting article in the newspaper, and I'm not sure whether you read it or not.
And what was the article?
It was about Christ as a man of color.
No, who wrote the article? What was the?
It was a good size article. There was quite a lot of many columns. And I thought it was interesting because when I have been reading the Bible and studying God's word and looking at who has been participating with God's word way back when, it seemed to me that the Egyptians were Black too. So I wouldn't be surprised if Christ were a Black man.
Well, some of the concerns regarding all of that is that I've been to the Middle East, I've been to Egypt, and they skin color is Black and white. So not every Egyptian is Black and not every Egyptian is white. So it's so hard to land the plane. But others are saying that Egypt, of course, is in Africa. It's on that continent. So when Jesus and his family escaped, they escaped and went into Egypt. So that kind of discussion, I don't even know how to step into it because I don't know for sure definitively. I do know that all of the pictures that we see of Christ in our country is that of a blonde, blue-eyed, white-looking person. And all of that, to me, feeds into the white supremacy concept of wanting to create their God and Jesus to look like them as a way of oppressing people of color. So that's a whole discussion that I need to prepare for if you're going to try to have that one today.
Well, I just want to suggest that we look into it and study it, because I wouldn't be surprised if Christ, Mary, or Joseph were Black people. I wouldn't be surprised. That's all I'm saying. Because in those days, there wasn't any kind of racism that I can understand has been happening over the years lately.
Well, I guarantee you that if the historians come up with all of the documents that say that Christ was Black, that his mom was Black, or Joseph was Black, if they ever lean in that direction, and there are scholars and theologians who have written about that, I'm just wondering how many folk in our country would still look at Christianity as their religion, as their faith of choice. So it will cause a major fire in the Christian community. So I'll look at the article. I'll see if I can find it. I didn't see it on Sunday. What are you doing? Going home and reading? You hear a message on Sunday, then you go home and say, I got to continue to stimulate my thinking?
Here's the article.
Okay, I will take a look at it.
Okay, I can put it in your box.
Oh, okay, great. So that will give me some time.
Yes,
to process it.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I will put it in your box because it apparently there was something that occurred in Rhode Island in a window that depicted Christ as a man of color.
and was there a reaction from people who were walking by looking at the photo?
I'm not sure because you have to read the whole article and I didn't have a chance to read all of it.
Oh, so the picture of Christ in the window is the reason why that article was written in looking at the color of Jesus?
It appears that way. I can just
Okay,
show it to you again.
okay, I see. Yeah, it did. That's what did it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's very interesting. And I know that the Egyptians were black. So maybe Mary, Joseph, and Jesus came in to their area and they were white. And it was not a big deal for the people who were there at that time.
Well, you're creating a firestorm, Miss Italian. So,
Well, I think that it's important for us to talk about something that's been printed as recently as last Sunday in the Boston Globe.
I'm ready. I think you're also trying to normally you depend upon me to lead our discussion. So I think today you said, "Oh, I got something that I can lead on and I can discuss." Is that what you're doing?
No, I was curious. And I wondered if you would have a reaction to what I said was in the newspaper.
I do have a reaction. I want to read it. And
Okay,
and I'll
then
send.
I will make sure that what I have in my hand will be in your box.
Okay.
You will have it on, I will be there probably Saturday.
Okay. So I just got a text from Eric Leiter,
Uh-huh.
and she asked me a question on the text. It said, "Are you on the air with Louise Carcione?" So
Oh,
he must be watching your broadcast.
good, good. Oh, that's nice.
Another one of your fans.
Yes, Eric is another Christian brother. It's good to know that he's watching.
You know, I had an interesting conversation on Tuesday. I called the Boston Police Department and had a preparation discussion on the active shooters
Right.
seminar that we want to have here at the church. And I found it to be interesting because there's one group of people who say that the meeting should be just for the Global Ministries Christian Church family because every church is different. You can't have a general teaching for other pastors because their exit doors, the way their churches are set up, are different than our church, and that's not the way to teach it. That it needs to be taught in each individual church. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that I will agree with anything that the police will require that we present in order to have the training in our building.
Well, they're ready to go, and so all we need to do now is to establish the date and the time.
Hmm.
And I don't want to have it in the evening because that a number of people are not going to drive at night, so that's out. It can't be during the day, a weekday, because most of our people are working.
Working, yes,
So it looks like the best time to have something like this would be on a Saturday in
correct.
the afternoon. And they said that it's about a 45-minute course, but when people ask questions, it can go as long as 2 hours. And so I've got to decide whether or not we want to have it in the sanctuary or in Buttery Hall. Buttery Hall will give us more of a closeness, but they would have to go into the sanctuary to, in my opinion, to look at it to see how it's set up. Because if there's an active shooter coming into the church, it would be on a Sunday when we're in the sanctuary, correct? Not in Buttery Hall.
Well, I think that we need to decide whether we're going to ask them to teach us something about the gun, the handling of a gun that would be in a classroom, and that could be in Buttery Hall. But if you're talking about an actual possible event that occurs, then you are talking about the sanctuary.
Okay, and the other thing, the most recent, well, one of the recent shootings in Texas, when the individual pulled up in the car, got out of the car, and started to shoot people randomly in the parking lot, Louise.
Right.
So that wasn't a person who was targeting a particular person. It's whomever was walking by. And a person said that I think it was after the shooting, they were out in the parking lot, and there was a little girl that was on the ground, and he went over and rolled her over. She had no face. And that's what they're not really saying that they should be saying when we talk about the is it the AR-15 rifles?
Yes, right.
That for a small body, especially a child, it could blow them apart, couldn't it?
Yes, it would be terrible. It would depend on how close they were with the rifle.
So Louise, how do families, because this is mental health in your neighborhood, how do families recover from that? Because families have to go and identify their children, their family members. And I could not conceive of going to a police station or to a morgue or wherever and identifying my child by their clothing because there's nothing else there. How can you live with that kind of a memory in your mind for the rest of your life? How do you do that?
Well, I think that I understand what you said, that your preference would be to try and identify a person by their faces. However, if they were shot in the face, there wouldn't be too much to look at, so that you would only be able to identify your own child by the clothing that you had dressed them with in the morning.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, the other shock of being home and saying your child, I guess it's different today that people are thinking that when their family members leave the house, some families are saying this could be the last time I talk with my child or I see my child or I see my family member. You used to feel that your children or family was safe at a mall because there are hundreds and thousands of people there. That's not having your child go to a school, having your child go to church, having your family members go to a mall. Louise, nothing is safe. There's nowhere that's really safe.
Well, if you say that, that could frighten everybody. But there are lots of places that nothing is happening and they are safe. So it's hard to know. It's very hard to know what is safe and what could potentially happen to our children.
Well, look at the other situation that happened in New York City. A man goes and he gets on the train. He has mental health issues. It's reported that he's not threatening anybody, but people are scared. A gentleman comes from behind this man and puts him in a chokehold and strangles him to death. And my question is that really appropriate? Because the person who strangled this person who had mental health issues was not arrested.
I
How
know,
can we decide that we're gonna strangle somebody because they're talking differently?
well, I think that that man was crying about the fact that he was hungry. He had not eaten. He had nothing to drink, nothing to eat. He was hungry. And I think that it was inappropriate to choke him to death when he was saying those things. So that particular situation did not seem fair to me. But I was not at the location. I was watching and listening to the information that was being given to us in the news. But going back to children, going back to the place that I think it was it Texas, where there was
Yes.
a number of classrooms of children, and the people had to go and identify their children in order to know who had been killed in the classroom.
Yeah.
And that was a horrible situation for them, but it had to be done. And it was too bad that so many of the children were shot by that person who was in there with a gun.
I don't know. I would tell Karen I don't want to remember my child looking like that. I wouldn't. You can't have an open casket for something like that. This is a very difficult period in our country.
I know, but you just reminded me of Emmett Till. Now,
Yeah.
when Emmett was killed, and that was wrong, there was no reason for him to be killed. But when he was killed and his body was finally given to his mother,
Yeah.
his mother decided to put him in the casket, in an open casket, because even though everyone could see the damage to his face and body,
Yeah.
she wanted people to see what had been done to her son.
Right.
She wanted that to be seen because of what was going on in the news. And so each of us has a different reaction. Sometimes we say, this is my reaction, but when something actually occurs with one of our children or our brother or a sister or a mother or father, whomever, we might change our mind entirely. If it was our wife, our husband, we might change our mind when it actually happened. We don't know what we don't know.
Okay, so let's go back to Emmett Till. So his mother was at a whole different place than I would be, that the average person would be. She saw the condition of her son, and whatever story she was told, there was anger there. There was a will to fight on behalf of my child, and she was in a whole different mindset. And
Right.
And I'm sure she had to identify him. And when she saw what she saw, it probably broke her, but she wasn't going to allow that to limit her ability to be able to tell the world what they did. Right. So that to me is a whole lot different than your child or your family member going to a mall and not coming back home, and you can't really identify that child because of the way the child looks. And again, as you're saying, well, we would all be in different states of mind if something like that happened to a family member or a friend, or if it happened in the church. I mean, there'd be some people who would say, I can't go back into that church.
Right, right,
We all have different reactions. And so
exactly.
how would you treat a person like that? Because that person's in shock. How do you treat a person that's in shock? You come on the scene. Now you're responsible for helping these people that you see in front of you. What would you say? What would you do? Oh,
Well,
by the way, Pastor Hobbs is watching us, and he said, "Good morning, Pastor Wall and Deacon Louise." He put my name before yours because he knows who the boss is. And
yes,
he said, I am also a fan and I'm tuned in. Just want you to know that.
I know. Well, I think that I would handle the situation differently if it were a member of our church. I would consider that either my brother or sister.
Yeah.
But I have been trained in psychology and in counseling, so I would provide some support for for the person's family, so that I would be able to be available for the family. But if the person were killed, there's nothing you can say to the person who's already dead.
I don't, again, I'm not a professional counselor. I've been in situations that have been horrific, very difficult. I was on Washington Street, 2 blocks from our church,
Mm-hmm.
where there were a number of people who were shot. And I went to the aid of one of the people, I believe, who had been shot.
Right.
And the mayor pulled up in his SUV, and I began to cry. And I said, Mr. Mayor, you've got to do something about this. You have got to do something about this.
Right.
And that was it had all everything that I had seen over the years came crashing down on that day.
Right.
And then because of my mindset, there were a couple of the young people from my church had come to my aid, and the police came over and said that they wanted to speak to those 2 children or young people.
Mm-hmm.
And I said no. Again, I was in a bad state, and I said no because I looked across the street and saw some of the gang members who were watching the police talk to those 2 young people. And I felt that if those young people had told what they knew about the shooting, because they had some information, their lives would have been at risk. And I couldn't communicate all of that in the street. So I told the young people, no, don't speak to the police right now. And what happened is that I went to the police myself once the young people walked away. And I said, I will arrange for those young people to come to church later on that day. Can you meet us there? And you can ask them whatever question you want to ask them. But the media didn't see that, didn't know what I had planned. So the media wrote a story that I should be charged with obstruction of justice because I refused to allow young people to talk to the police. Then the newspaper started writing negative articles about me. They were attacking me. And the police never went to the media to say, we got more information from those 2 young people when Bruce brought them in the church than we would have gotten if we were out on the street. And the lives of the young people were saved because we did it in the confines of the church. So again, that shooting impacted me, and I'm glad I was impacted because had those kids talked to the police out in the street and told what they knew, their lives could have been at risk. So we all react differently to a crisis.
Yes, and we don't always know what our reaction is going to be.
Yeah.
And I think that what you did was helpful to those two young people. And that is more important than what the news media neglected to add to the information.
Right. And I think I may have explained to the news media later on another day what my strategy was. But again, you can't prepare for some of these things that happen, right?
Right.
And it's one thing being on the street when someone's shot and you've gone to their aid, or you
Mhm.
go to an airport, you go to a place where they're housing people who were involved in a fire. You know, you have your set of emotions, I have my set of emotions, but we can't plan for this. And I feel like the whole active shooters thing, I've been asking myself, why am I pushing this? Because I'm pushing it. I've been pushing the police, I've been pushing people to think about this. That there are some people who want to say, we don't want to think about this. Why are you bringing this into the church? This is nothing's happening in our church. Why are you doing that? But I
Well,
have a feeling on the inside, and I do not know where it's coming from, that we have to be ready. Do you
yes, yes.
do you feel that I'm pushing too hard on this? Do you feel that are you asking yourself the question, why are we having this in our church?
No, I'm trying to understand which one we're going to do first. I believe that we should have some kind of training in our church, but I think we should start with the classroom style in Buttrey Hall before we do an actual assignment that looks like an actual shooting in the sanctuary. So that would be my preference. But I agree with you that it is important for us to be doing something in our church so that the people who are members of our church know that we're thinking of them, and we're thinking of their families, and we're thinking of providing something that will help them should anything negative occur.
Yeah, that yeah, I'm going to have another conversation with the police because they said to me that their strategy, their teaching comes from the Homeland Security. That's the
Mm-hmm.
organization that they model their teaching afterwards and
Right.
after, and it's that run, hide, or fight mantra that they teach. Run as fast as you can, get out of there. Hide if you can't get out, and fight if you can't hide. Because if not, you surely will find yourself in trouble. So, and they're saying that they do not necessarily endorse any of the other training because they said they're very careful how they say definitively, if this happens, you absolutely need to do this. Because their concern is that if they tell you that this is the absolute and only way to confront this and something happens, that the city could be sued because somebody could say, well, you told us that we had to do this and this was the only thing that we can do. Have you ever faced a situation in a training where you were cautious because you did not want to speak with an absolute tone?
Whenever I've done any training with people who I
Civilians?
was responsible for,
Yeah.
I did not share the information that I shared with them with people that might provide it to the news media, because that was not appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate to put everything in the news media that could make the individuals unsafe. Going back to your story about the two young men.
Yeah. I'm sorry, say that again. Say that again.
I'm just saying that I would be very careful about who I said what to and what I would share to the news media, because that might make the situation unsafe for the people that I'm trying to help.
Right, but in your training sessions, when you have all these people in a room and you're training them, are
Mhm.
your comments like absolute comments? You must do this, you have to do this, or do you just paint a picture that here is something that I believe your training says, here's something that I recommend? Because it sounds to me that some of the trainers are not saying, absolutely, you need to go this way. They basically saying, I'm training you this way, but there are other alternatives. Do you give people a way out from having to do exactly what you say?
Yes, because sometimes I did the training to the people who might be subject to something negative occurring to them. And then there was a different training set up for the actual police group. And the police were not trained at the same time in the same place. So that was done in a different location. And I always offered suggestions to people for them to decide what it was they might have to do under those circumstances.
Right. So you paint a picture and say, this is the situation that you're in. I'm recommending that you could do this. Do you say you could do this, you could do that, or you could do that? Or do you just say, I'm recommending that you do this, and you give them one outlet?
No, I would say I would make more than one suggestion.
Oh, you would.
Yes.
And let them decide on their own which one suits their experience.
Yes, I would let them decide whether they wanted to hide, whether they would lock themselves in a closet and
Yeah.
get underneath some clothing or something,
Yeah.
or whether they would just move out of the situation entirely, just move away.
Do you know what a safe room is? Have you heard that expression before?
Well, I've heard it, but it changes. It might mean something different in every location.
So they call it a safe room or a panic room. It's something that you could build in your home, or they're talking about having those in schools now, Louise,
Mhm.
or maybe in churches where if something were to happen, you got to get everybody into this place where bullets can't penetrate, people can't break into. It's a safe room, and people are building them in their houses
Mhm.
that in the event that somebody breaks into the house and that they can get to that safe room once their door is locked, it can't be penetrated. Do you think a church needs to have a panic room or a safe room?
Well, there might be some place where somebody in the church might be in a position to be able to make some phone calls and get some, call 911 and get some assistance to the building if something's going wrong.
Well, my thought that a safe room or a safe house in a church would only work like during the day if there are maybe 3 or 4 of you in the church and somebody breaks in and is threatening people and you run into the safe room, because you couldn't build a safe room large enough to accommodate everybody in the sanctuary. It
Well,
just wouldn't work.
that's what I was thinking. If
Yeah.
it were in the sanctuary, you wouldn't have another room that size, and you wouldn't have another room the size of the Buttery Hall, except for the room in the basement.
Right. Yeah, that definitely would not work inside of a large auditorium.
Right.
But in a home, it can work. And people breaking into their homes all the time, and that's why the idea of a safe house or a safe room is coming up in a lot of discussions that I'm hearing. Have you ever seen a safe house or a safe room before?
No, but what I have seen is locations for a group of mentally ill people
Yeah.
that were in an open unit in a location that was locked, that would keep them in a place that would be more safety.
Wow. 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 Well, again, what's happening in our society, what's happening in our world
Mhm.
is what's happening in our world has us all thinking about how can I save my life? That's on the tip of the tongue of many people when they leave their homes, Louise. They're trying to figure out, am I gonna make it back? Grocery stores are not safe. The movies are not safe. Just about everywhere you go, Louise, you
Well,
could say it's not
that's
safe.
interesting because on Sunday, I received a ride from the ride that picked me up at our church and was supposed to take me directly home. But there were a couple of people who wanted to go shopping. So they took two people to the shopping area in Weymouth first before they took me home.
Yeah,
And I noticed when we went to the shopping area that while the two people got off the vehicle, that there were lots of people who were leaving their cars in the parking lot and coming into the door of certain shops that they were going to shop in. So I saw a lot of people going to the shopping area
yeah,
on Sunday. I was
yeah,
surprised by that.
yeah. Wow. So what did you think was going on?
I just thought that people were ignoring any possibility that somebody might show up with a gun and do something stupid and wrong. And so they just went shopping as they might have.
Are you feeling safe yourself when you leave your home? Do you think about this at all when you're leaving your home, or your mind is on other things?
Well, I'm either in the vehicle with one of my children, my adult children, or I'm in a vehicle with the ride.
Mhm.
So I tend to always be traveling with someone.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm in better. I feel that I'm in a kind of safe situation.
Mhm. Well, again, I think that because of social media and the fact that our news, we're not waiting to the next morning to read our news in the newspaper anymore.
Right.
On your phone, you can program your phone to send you a notice from any of the newspapers or any of the TV outlets that you watch or read. And
Right.
those notices come nonstop. I had to turn off the notices for the news, Louise, because it was just too many. So
Mhm.
with that, it's called, I think a lot of us are on overload, right?
Mhm.
The average person is on overload. And then the people who are in positions of power, they're definitely on overload. You know, we all know that the president is briefed every morning regarding the status of the world, right?
Right.
He's briefed. But now all of us are briefed every morning because we can see things on our phones or on our tablets or on our computers and get as much information as high officials are receiving. And you know what? Not all of us, Louise, are prepared emotionally. Well, not all of us are prepared to carry all that in our heads throughout the day.
Well, I know that now that I am retired from my position as working for the state,
Yeah.
that I'm in a different position in my in my mind and in my self.
Yeah.
But when I was working every day, that was very different, because every day that I went to the office, if there was something that was being suggested that was unsafe, I
Yeah.
went where the patients were. So I left my office and went to where the patients were so that I could offer my assistance. I did that every day.
And again, now that you are not doing that, are you staying current with all that's happening in the world, or do you turn some of it off?
I know that what might be happening in a location where I used to work for 50 years, I know nothing. I do not know what's happening now.
Mhm.
I'm not informed properly, and I'm not calling in and getting the information.
And when you reach my age, and whatever age you are, we don't really want to absorb all of that and get that into our system every day. One, because there's nothing we can really do about it other than talk to God about it. But
Right,
we can no longer get into our automobiles and race to the scene of the crisis. I mean, those days are over for you and I,
right,
more so me than you. And we are trying to balance caring for our families at this period
right.
than we are taking care of the world, right? So there's a transition going on in our own thinking
Mhm.
from being available to the world, to the people we work for, work with, and being available for our families that are growing. Our families are expanding and growing,
Right. They
and they
sure
need
are.
us. They need us, and they need our expertise, maybe even more than they needed it before.
I know, because my family, as I think about my family and plan for my family safety, it's grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and even great-great-grandchildren. And that's very different than it was when I was working.
Yeah, yeah,
So things are different. And I think that each one of us, whether we're retired from a major function in the Commonwealth, which was my experience, or I am sharing some of my energy with you, Pastor, at the church, because I go to our church and it is my church, and I feel responsible for the people who are in my church that I might possibly be able to offer some assistance to.
mhm.
Um, things are different. Things are different now.
Yeah. They are different, and it just seems that. Um, One last comment about this. Yesterday, a jury came back and found the former President Donald Trump responsible for his activities and behavior with a woman of many years ago. And the judge admonished the jurors not to tell anybody that they served on the jury that found against the former president. And the reason why he warned them was because their lives could be in jeopardy for the
Mm.
decision that they made. I've never heard anything, I've never heard a judge warn a jury, you don't want to go out and tell people you were on this jury. Is that not a little bit crazy?
No, it's happened before, but it isn't always announced publicly.
That is, yeah, I mean, I could see, let's say in Dorchester, if I went to the Dorchester court and I was serving on a jury of a gang related crime and the jurors found a person guilty, I could see a judge saying, maybe not in front of the whole courthouse, but you got to be careful. You don't want to be telling people all over the world that you were a part of this jury. But this judge made this a public statement, which to
Mhm.
me shows the state of our country.
Well, yeah, right. Maybe that particular judge had a reason to say something.
Well, I think he said it because he knew that former President Donald Trump has loyal followers, and
Mhm.
they could do anything,
Right.
even to the point of harming people whom they thought had created an injury for
Mm.
the former president. But
Well, there were people killed at January 6th
yeah,
on the attack to the Capitol.
yeah, yeah.
There were individuals killed at that time, so anything's possible.
Anything
So,
is possible. And the former president is losing so many of the cases that he's had since January
mhm.
6th. And there are more cases. He's facing more and more cases.
Well,
Uh,
he had 32 cases against him before this one that he just lost the other day.
crazy. This is crazy. This is
Yeah,
crazy.
but these are other things too that have no connection to what we were talking about initially.
But see, it continues with the trauma that
Mhm.
people are going through. For example, I know people who do not want to serve on juries because they're
Right,
scared.
right.
It's trauma. The shootings in the street that I used to deal with, it's trauma.
Mhm.
Having to have a active shooters training in your church because of the trauma.
Right.
And we want to make ourselves available. And my last comment is the more popular or visible your church is, the more the likelihood that something like that could happen in your fellowship.
Well, and the more reason that having some kind of training has value.
Well, time is, we have 1 minute to go, so I'll give you the final word because after all, it's your broadcast.
It may be my broadcast, but you always bring something that I consider heavy duty that we talk about, we share with each other and share with all of those who are listening. So thank you very much, Pastor, for being the co-host again today. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise, and look forward to talking with you on Sunday and then next Wednesday. So it sounds like we're meeting twice a week now.
Yes, at least. Okay,
Okay, bye-bye.
bye.